The Robinson family got lost in space.
Yeah, the series was set in the far future, 1997.
Do you have a name?
My name's Will Robinson, sir. And I'm not a toy, I'm a boy.
Oh, nonsense, nonsense.
Think you know Lost in Space? The show with the cowardly Dr. Smith and the wisecracking robot? Well, what if I told you that the show you remember was a complete accident? The pop culture touchstone, famous for its whimsical adventures and bizarre aliens, was never supposed to be funny. It started life as a dark, serious science fiction drama. So, what on earth happened? How did a gritty story about survival in the cosmos secretly morph into a campy comedy, sometimes right under the noses of the viewers and even the cast? The answer is a wild mix of on-set improvisation, last-minute character additions, intense pressure from the network, and a ratings war with a certain caped crusader. This is the untold story of a show that completely reinvented itself in plain sight. We're pulling back the curtain on the hidden details, the production chaos, and the behind-the-scenes battles that turned Lost in Space from a somber space saga into the goofy, beloved classic it is today. First up, the original pilot was a totally different show. Before the Jupiter 2, before the iconic robot, and most importantly, before the scheming Dr. Zachary Smith, there was an unaired pilot called No Place to Hide. Filmed in 1965, this was creator Irwin Allen's pure vision, a straight-laced, serious sci-fi drama. The ship was called the Gemini 12, and its crew was on a 98-year journey to Alpha Centauri. The tone was heavy, focusing on the sheer terror of being stranded on an alien world. In this version, the Robinsons weren't just colonists, they were a highly capable family of specialists. John and Maureen held doctorates, Don West was a skilled geologist, and the children were exceptionally bright. They were a tight-knit family facing the brutal realities of survival. What got them lost wasn't sabotage, it was a random meteor storm that sent the Gemini 12 spiraling off course. There were no funny villains or friendly machines. The threats were real and environmental. Giant cyclopean monsters, vicious storms, and the creeping dread of being utterly alone. The pilot even ended on a cliffhanger, with the family being watched by mysterious aliens, setting up a much darker story. When CBS executives saw it, they liked the concept but had some big notes. They felt it was missing a few things for long-term success, namely a recurring villain and something with a bit more personality. Their notes would accidentally change television history. This brings us to the two most iconic characters in Lost in Space, who, it turns out, weren't in the original plan at all. After watching the pilot, CBS executives made a fateful request: give us a villain and a robot. This led to the creation of Dr. Zachary Smith and the B-9 environmental control robot. Both were hastily written into the first official episode, The Reluctant Stowaway. Dr. Smith was imagined as a foreign agent and saboteur, a genuinely evil guy meant to create ongoing conflict. The robot was initially just a piece of hardware, a general utility non-theorizing environmental control robot. To be exact, these two additions completely changed the show's DNA. The Robinsons are no longer lost due to cosmic bad luck. Now, it's because Dr. Smith, trying to sabotage the mission, gets himself trapped on board at launch, and his extra weight throws the Jupiter 2 off course. Smith was supposed to be a short-term character, killed off after just a few episodes. But the actor cast in the role, a man named Jonathan Harris, had other plans. His performance would not only save his character but completely take over the entire series. This is maybe the most crucial point. Jonathan Harris basically improvised the Dr. Smith we all know and love. Harris, a veteran character actor, was cast as the villain but found the part, as written, to be a one-dimensional, snarling bore. Afraid he'd be written out of the show in a hurry, he started experimenting. He began rewriting his own dialogue, injecting the character with that signature blend of cowardice, vanity, and flowery, alliterative insults. He transformed Smith from a cold-blooded baddie into a self-serving, hysterical buffoon who was way more of a danger to himself than to the Robinsons. In a move that was rare for TV back then, producer Irwin Allen gave Harris incredible creative freedom. Harris himself said he was given carte blanche to do whatever he wanted with the character. He'd stay up nights dreaming up new insults for the robot, like bubble-headed booby and tin-plated nincompoop, because he loved their dynamic. This spontaneous evolution from villain to comic relief wasn't just tolerated, it was encouraged. The producers saw that Harris was creating gold. Bill Mumy, who played Will Robinson, recalled that Smith was truly evil at first, but Harris single-handedly turned him into the prissy, cowardly guy everyone remembers. This ad-libbed performance was so powerful, it forced the entire show to change around him. As Dr. Smith's star rose, someone else's had to fall. And that someone was the show's original hero, Professor John Robinson, played by Guy Williams. Williams was a huge star, famous for playing Zorro for Disney. He signed on to Lost in Space thinking it would be a serious sci-fi adventure with him at the center. In the first season, which was shot in black and white, that was mostly true. John Robinson was the strong, decisive patriarch leading his family through all sorts of danger, but as Jonathan Harris's Dr. Smith became more popular and funnier, the show's focus shifted dramatically. Williams, a serious and capable actor, suddenly had less and less to do. The plots weren't about survival and exploration anymore. Instead, they were driven by whatever ridiculous scheme Dr. Smith had cooked up that week. Williams and his co-star Mark Goddard, who played Major Don West, were often just there to react to Smith's antics, scolding him, rolling their eyes, and cleaning up his messes. Guy Williams grew deeply frustrated with the show's turn toward camp. He felt his role had been shrunk and that the smart sci-fi drama he'd signed up for had become the Dr. Smith, Will, and Robot show. After Lost in Space was cancelled, Williams largely retired from acting and moved to Argentina, where he was still a beloved icon for his role as Zorro. So why did the producers let the show get so campy so fast? The answer can be summed up in one word: Batman. In January 1966, right in the middle of Lost in Space's first season, the Adam West Batman series premiered on another network. It was a massive, overnight sensation. Its pop art, over-the-top style became a cultural phenomenon, and suddenly, every network wanted a piece of that action. Lost in Space *, which aired in a similar time slot, was right in the line of fire. According to cast members and TV historians, the producers made a strategic decision: if you can't beat M, join M. They decided to ditch the serious tone of the first season and lean hard into the camp and comedy that Jonathan Harris was already pioneering. The show switched to full color for its second season, making the sets and costumes pop, and the stories became more and more absurd. This wasn't just a slow evolution, it was a deliberate pivot to compete with the biggest show on television. The goal was no longer to make a serious space drama but to go head-to-head with Batman in sheer, unapologetic outrageousness. Once the show went full camp in seasons 2 and 3, all bets were off. The writers completely embraced the new comedic direction, and the plots swerved from science fiction into pure fantasy and slapstick. One of the most infamous examples is The Great Vegetable Rebellion, an episode so silly that even the cast reportedly struggled to get through it without laughing. The story featured an intelligent, man-sized carrot named Tybo who tries to turn the Robinsons into plants, with Dr. Smith destined to become a stalk of celery, and the weirdness didn't stop there. Other episodes had Dr. Smith turning into a jukebox, Will Robinson being recruited for an intergalactic circus, and the family running into a gang of space hippies on motorcycles. There was an episode with a space knight chasing a gentle lady dragon, and another where Dr. Smith is put on trial by aliens because his brain is too crummy to be used in their computer. These storylines were a world away from the grim survival tales of Season 1. They were colorful, illogical, and utterly ridiculous, cementing the show's new identity as a kid-friendly comedy. Just like Dr. Smith, the robot evolved, too. Originally, he was just a functional machine. In the first episode, Dr. Smith even reprograms him for destruction. But as the series went on, the robot developed a real personality, mainly through his interactions with two people, Will Robinson and Dr. Smith. His bond with Will became the show's heart. His protective warnings of danger, Will Robinson, became an immortal catchphrase, giving the machine a soul and making him a true member of the family. His other key relationship, of course, was with Dr. Smith. Their dynamic turned into a classic comedy duo, like a space-age Laurel and Hardy. Smith would constantly sling his flowery insults, calling the robot everything from a cucumbersome clod to a cretinous clod pâté. The robot, in turn, usually got the last laugh, with his logical, does not compute, responses perfectly highlighting how absurd Smith's schemes were. This banter was almost entirely invented by Jonathan Harris, who saw the comedic gold in their mismatched pairing. The robot's voice, Dick Tufeld, delivered the deadpan lines perfectly, making their scenes unforgettable. The machine that was supposed to be a simple utility became one of the show's biggest comedy stars. Ever get a sense of déjà vu watching Lost in Space? You're not crazy. Producer Irwin Allen was the absolute master of the shoestring budget, and he ran his production company like a well-oiled recycling plant. Props, costumes, monster suits, and even whole sets were constantly reused across his TV shows, which also included Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, The Time Tunnel, and Land of the Giants. A sea monster from Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea might get a quick paint job and show up as a land alien on Lost in Space. Those iconic computer banks with the flashing lights? They were pieces of a real IBM computer and appeared in pretty much every Irwin Allen show. Even the spaceship models got recycled. The Spindrift ship from Land of the Giants was actually a modified version of a vehicle that first appeared on Lost in Space. This was all about saving money, a necessity born from the huge ambitions of his shows and the tight budgets of 1960s TV. For fans, spotting these crossover props has become a fun game, a tribute to Allen's reputation as a frugal but imaginative showman. You know the voice, but do you know the man inside the machine? While Dick Tufeld provided the robot's iconic voice, the physical performance was all thanks to an actor named Bob May. For 83 episodes, May was the guy inside the 350-pound fiberglass and metal suit, and it was an incredibly tough, thankless job. He could barely see or hear and had to rely on offstage cues to time his movements with the pre-recorded voice track. The costume, designed by Robert Kinoshita, who also designed the famous Robbie the Robot from Forbidden Planet, was not built for comfort. It was hot, clumsy, and claustrophobic. Bob May once recalled that Jonathan Harris loved to play pranks on him, like whispering his lines incorrectly through the suit speaker to try to mess him up during a take. Despite all the challenges, May brought a surprising amount of personality to the role. He was the unsung hero of the show, the man who gave life and movement to one of sci-fi's most beloved characters. Here's a fun fact, that thrilling, adventurous theme music from Lost in Space *. It was composed by a young John Williams. Yes, that John Williams, the future legend behind Star Wars, Jaws, Indiana Jones, and Jurassic Park. Back in the 60s, Williams was a busy TV composer, and Irwin Allen hired him for several projects. The theme for Lost in Space is pure Williams, a rousing, orchestral piece that perfectly captured the spirit of adventure the show was first going for. What's even more interesting is how the theme changed along with the show. The original theme, used for the first 2 seasons, is heroic and dramatic. But for the third and final season, when the show went even deeper into camp, Williams wrote a brand new theme. It was faster, more frantic, almost giddy, reflecting the show's pivot from serious drama to zany, weekly adventures. Listening to the 2 themes back-to-back is like hearing the show's entire evolution in just a few minutes of music. Here's a small detail that says everything about the show's power dynamics. Jonathan Harris's screen credit. Even though he became the undeniable star of the show, Harris was never listed in the opening credits with the main cast. Instead, every single episode, he received a special guest star credit. This wasn't a slight, it was a brilliant contract negotiation. Harris was hired after the main cast's contracts and billing were already locked in. Instead of taking a lesser credit, he insisted on the prominent, special guest star status. He reportedly told Irwin Allen, "Either I'm a special guest star, or I'm not in it at all." The move not only gave him a unique and prestigious billing but also highlighted his unique role on the show. He wasn't just another member of the crew, he was the wild card, the scene stealer, the man who had hijacked the series. It was a clever power play that made sure Dr. Smith always stood apart. Think the B-9 robot was the only mechanical star on set? Think again. In the Season 2 episode, War of the Robots, he faced off against none other than the most famous robot in sci-fi history, Robbie the robot from the 1956 classic Forbidden Planet. For sci-fi fans of the day, this was a crossover of epic proportions. In the episode, Robbie is an older, more logical, and ultimately villainous robot who tries to manipulate the Robinsons, leading to a classic showdown between the two mechanical titans. The fact that this crossover could even happen goes back to their shared DNA. Both the B-9 robot and Robbie were designed by the same person, Robert Kinoshita. This made their on-screen meeting a fun, meta moment for anyone in the know. It was a clash of two sci-fi eras, the serious cinema of the 50s versus the fun, campy TV of the 60s, and it remains one of the show's most memorable moments. Despite its popularity, Lost in Space was abruptly cancelled after its third season, leaving the Robinsons lost in space forever. The news was a surprise to everyone, including the cast and crew, who were expecting a fourth season. Irwin Allen had even ordered new scripts. So what happened? It all came down to two things: money and demographics. First, the show was getting really expensive. The cost per episode had soared, and actor salaries were rising. At the same time, the studio, 20th Century Fox, was dealing with budget cuts after losing a fortune on movies like Cleopatra. When CBS asked for a budget cut for Season 4, Irwin Allen apparently refused, saying the show couldn't be made for less. Second, the ratings, while still decent, were skewing younger. A growing chunk of the audience was children, which was less appealing to advertisers who wanted to reach adults with more spending power. The mix of falling ratings, a less desirable audience, and rising costs sealed the show's fate. The Jupiter 2's journey ended not with a bang, but with a budget meeting. Here's one of the great what-if stories in TV history. In 1965, CBS had to choose between two new science fiction shows. One was Irwin Allen's Lost in Space. The other was a pitch from a writer named Gene Roddenberry for a show called Star Trek. CBS picked Lost in Space. They felt a show about a family was more accessible and commercial than Roddenberry's more complex vision of a space crew exploring moral and philosophical ideas. Star Trek was then picked up by NBC, and the two shows became rivals, often seen as polar opposites. Lost in Space was the fun, fantasy adventure, while Star Trek was the serious, thought-provoking drama. Ironically, during their original runs, Lost in Space was the bigger ratings hit. It consistently beat Star Trek, which struggled to find an audience and was always close to being cancelled. Of course, history would have the last laugh. Star Trek exploded in reruns and became a global phenomenon. But for a little while in the mid-60s, it was the Robinsons, not the crew of the Enterprise, who were winning the TV space race. When you look back, the story of Lost in Space is just one happy accident after another. It was a show that was never meant to be a comedy. Its most famous character was an afterthought who was supposed to be killed off. Its hero was pushed to the sidelines, and its entire tone was shaped by a rival show about a man in a bat suit. By all rights, it should have been a mess, and yet, somehow, it all worked. The chaotic, improvised, and often illogical world of Lost in Space captured the imaginations of a generation. The trio of the cowardly Dr. Smith, the earnest Will Robinson, and the loyal robot created a dynamic that was pure magic. The show's willingness to just be fun created a pop culture classic that has lasted for decades. It just goes to show you that sometimes, the best laid plans are the ones that go wonderfully, wildly wrong. The show fans fell in love with wasn't the one the creators set out to make, but its accidental journey is exactly what made it unforgettable. The journey of Lost in Space from a serious drama to a camp classic is one of the most fascinating stories in TV history. It proves that amazing things can come from chaos, and sometimes the best moments are the ones that were never in the script. The show that started with a vision of grim survival ended as a celebration of silly, heartfelt adventure, and fans wouldn't have it any other way. So what's your favorite Lost in Space memory? Is it a classic Dr. Smith insult, a bizarre alien, or a moment between Will and the robot? Drop it in the comments below. And if you had fun on this deep dive, do us a favor and hit that like button and subscribe for more stories behind your favorite classic shows. Thanks for watching.